Hi, my name is Jamie Lynch, and you are listening to Eating Habits, my podcast about everything restaurants. I will explore the human element of the hospitality business, and I'll talk to the who's who in restaurants, explore their stories, and hear what's on their minds in the ever-changing landscape of the food and beverage industry.
Hey everyone, my name is Bill Smith, and I am the retired chef at Crook's Corner restaurant in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And you are listening to Eating Habits.
Thanks for joining us. It's super great to meet you. I can't wait to hear your story. Like I said before we started recording, when I moved down to North Carolina in 2002, I had already, heard of you. You definitely have already solidified a name for yourself in the South in the hospitality industry, and I've known about you since then. And I was really excited to speak to you. So, thanks.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So, for our listeners, tell us a little bit about Bill Smith. Like, where did it all start? You are a true North Carolinian.
I am. I was born and grew up in a town called New Bern down on the coast, and actually pretty much lived there until I was 18 when I came to Chapel Hill to go to UNC. Never crossed my mind to be a professional chef. It's a long story, but essentially I was a bad student, but I started a music club called the Cat's Cradle, and that sort of took my attention off of studying, shall we say. But we were horrible business people, so I had to find a day job to keep the club open. I ended up in a kitchen that was where Bill Neal was the chef. At that time, he was cooking French things, and I began to learn. As I was getting sick of owning a club, I was beginning to understand and realize that cooking actually suited me very well. So that got me started. I'd had a good background because I had grown up with good cooks, and without realizing it, I was getting an appreciation of good food. And one thing led to another. Bill and Morton, his wife, divorced. He went down the street, started Crook's Corner. He unhappily passed away. About 5 years after he died, they needed a chef down there, and they called me, and I moved down the street. And then I was there for 25 years.
Wowzer. What about the early days in your youth? What about that situation set you up for this appreciation for good food? I mean, were you did you hang out in the kitchen when you were young? Were you, that kind of thing?
Well, yes and no. My great grandmother was a fabulous cook, but she didn't like people bothering her in the kitchen, so I had to watch from a distance. But
I can relate.
And my great grandmother on my mother's side, actually, and she, as was typical of the time, there were multi-generational families living in one house, and the big meal of the day was lunch. And she would cook a giant lunch every day for everybody in the family that was anywhere nearby downtown at work, and they would come home for lunch every day. So that was the thing I remember the most, although all her food was always good. Mm-hmm. The other thing was that we were Catholics, and so on Friday we weren't allowed to eat meat in those days. It was before Vatican II. And so we had lots and lots of seafood, and we were on the coast, so that made sense. We probably would have had it anyway. But so that was sort of something that was always on my mind, and something I always looked forward to. But mainly it was just that my great-grandmother particularly, but my grandmother and my aunts and stuff were fabulous cooks. And so it gave you the expectation that every time you sat down, everything was going to be really good. So I tried to carry that with me when I became a chef. Everybody should, first thing they should sit down and have a good meal. That was my first duty, not to conduct a food class and not to, not to look for celebrity, but to make everybody sit down and have a good dinner, have a good time with the people they came to eat with, Mm-hmm. And so that sort of governed how I worked. And I say it started long before I knew I was going to be doing this. So.
What was the approach to food in your household? Was it like, I mean, obviously I was a part of a chef's field trip up to Oriental, North Carolina, a couple of weeks ago, maybe about a month ago.
Oh, really? Right down the road?
Yeah. And it was the first time I'd been up there and saw the area. And I did not realize how fertile an area it is, being that close to the coast, being in the Pamlico Sound, having all that amazing seafood, plus just the fertility of the soil up there and stuff.
Sure.
It was really eye-opening. I'm curious if, your experience early as a youngster kind of reflected that in the food that you guys ate at home.
Okay, again, without realizing it at the time, mm-hmm. But yes, my father was actually a mail carrier down in Pamlico County, and so it was customary in those days that you would give gifts to your mailman all the time. So he was always coming home with bushels of oysters or, bags full of tomatoes or all this kind of stuff. So we ate very seasonally because the people were farmers down there. Often families were both. You had people who fished, but they also had a farm. So I grew up eating good seasonal food. Fish is seasonal also.
Yeah.
Fish come and go. Bluefish come twice a year, and there's a trout season and crab season and oyster seasons and all that stuff. So yeah, it like I say, I was observing it without realizing that it was going to apply to me. So importantly later on, it was just something I came to expect, without thinking about it, without analyzing it. So
Right. Was there ever a point when you started cooking that you realized, because you started cooking when was it like in the 80s and 90s? Is that
I went into the kitchen at La Residence in the late '70s,
okay?
but I wasn't in charge of anything for several years. But
Right. So you started as well. Let's talk about that a little bit.
I started peeling potatoes. Is what
Yep.
I was going to Europe, even though I had a club that wasn't making any money. I was going to Europe, and one of my roommates was the head waitress at the French restaurant. She said, "Well, I think they need somebody in the kitchen to peel potatoes and chop parsley and blah blah blah." So I went in and I took that job, and then when I got back, they hired me back. And then at that point, it was when I began to say, "Oh yeah, maybe you should do this." And so I learned on the job. I never went to any kind of school or anything. French technique is applicable to all kinds of cooking,
Hmm.
so that was a good place to start, frankly. Again, I didn't realize it at the time, but I was just getting good training. That kitchen, Bill and Morton they were Francophiles, but they weren't chefs really, and so they knew the food, and they knew the vibe and the culture and everything, but they didn't always know how to do all the things that they wanted to make. And so we would work with like Julia Child in one hand, to go, okay, she says, that kind of thing. And so it was really fun. It was almost like an experimental kitchen in some ways.
Right.
That we learned as we went all together,
Yeah.
but they were better than me, but still, and we were learned by doing, sort of.
In the early days, how did you approach, provisioning the kitchen to cook this kind of French cuisine? Were you guys using local ingredients? Where was the product coming from? That kind of thing.
We used local as much as was possible. The farmers market was just getting started. It's huge now, and all the people in the farmers market also supply restaurants. They deliver by trucks and stuff like this. It was just the beginning of those days, so we did that as much as we could, but it wasn't possible to do everything that way.
Right.
But we had a local fish market we used a lot, and then there were some farmers that would come to the door and say the market was just getting going. And over the years now, it's like it's a great situation between restaurants and local farmers and produce. We even have
Yeah.
cheesemakers and fishmongers and all kinds of people that and meat and all this stuff we didn't have at the beginning. But yeah, we have pretty
Right.
much anything. It's very seasonal though, which is what you want anyway. So that's the way you like it. So
Yeah. Awesome. Did you realize, or was it apparent to you when you started cooking in the late 70s, early 80s, that there was, or was there, a kind of disconnect between kind of the local food movement? There wasn't really much of a movement at that point, but like, you know, locality, local sourcing, that kind of thing. Was there kind of a disconnect between the restaurants and that type of cooking in those early days?
yeah, this was a small town south. It was a university town, so there's sort of a more sophisticated dining public than you might find somewhere else. But in those days, expensive meals dining out were because everybody was like, "Ooh, what's going on here?" I could make this for $3 at my house. So there was that to overcome to the begin, to begin with. But like I said, there was also a public that was used to traveling and new things and they saw dining out as more than just dinner, or whatever. That was like, they understood that how it worked, but it was a small portion of the public at first. There were because it did cost more,
Right.
to do food like that way, you know. And now no one, it never comes up hardly.
It's kind of expected these days, right? It's like it seems like if you don't
Sort
have some sort of locality on your menu, you're missing the bus a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, and I always tried. Honestly, I part of being a chef is as you know is figuring out the money all the time too. And I always tried to like figure out ways to arrange the menu so that really expensive things could be a little less expensive and cheap things could be we could make them a little more expensive because people were expecting to pay more, and then so that you wouldn't go bankrupt coming to dinner too. So
Right.
yeah.
So are you a bit of a celebrity there at the old Chapel Hill food scene?
I'm afraid so, and
Yeah.
I'm very suspicious of celebrity at this point.
Yeah.
Yes, and so I try to use the celebrity to promote good causes. I do charity events and things like that. It's to me, after a while, it gets sort of silly, frankly, and
Hmm.
but it's okay, whatever. I use it. I do a lot of work with immigration. I do voter registration. I do all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Fundraisers. That museum at Harker's Island down near where you were, that was badly damaged in a hurricane a few years ago. We did a big fundraiser for them. We were able to get them a lot of money. Did a thing for Table a few weeks ago, which is food for in the school for kids. Got them a bunch of money for that. So I try to use it in that way.
Beautiful. You were kind of known for being an advocate for workers' rights and stuff like that. I mean, there's quite a bit of documented stuff about you. You know,
Yeah, I've raised some hell, I'm afraid.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Let's talk about that a little bit. I find that super interesting. Like, why was that so important to you, and where did this fiery kind of rebel streak come from?
That runs in the family, I'm afraid. It goes back to my great, 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 great grandmother, who was an abolitionist in North Carolina, of all things. But
Hmm.
anyway, so the thing with my kitchen staff was that in the 90s here in North Carolina, there was nobody to work, and it was before 9/11, so no one had any bad feelings about immigrants, and so people came back and forth mainly from Mexico all the time. And next thing I knew, my kitchen was half Mexican, and they were my buddies. And then after I guess after 9/11, things began to change, and it became really hateful toward them. And I just felt the need to jump in there and defend them however I could. And that's just what I've done. Like I said, they're my best friends. I go down and see the guys that have gone home. I go back at least once a year to visit and just hang out,
Hmm.
because they meant so much to me. And I don't know, it's a weird thing that we clicked, somehow. We have nothing in common. I'm twice as old as any of them, but yeah, they're among my very best friends, the people I love the most. So I just decided to jump in whenever I saw that I could, and
Hmm.
it was everything from getting passports for the children who had been born here to, I don't know, scaring up lawyers if we needed them. It was just all kinds of stuff. It was everything different. There was a million different problems and they continue to show up actually, medical expenses, all kinds of things. So I did some fundraisers for that, and people were very generous, particularly people in the restaurant world, in the food world, in the food writing world, came forward with lots of money when we needed it. After the pandemic, everything shut down. All these people were thrown out of work. Nobody had any, couldn't pay their rent. Nobody had any food, and people, it was remarkable how generous people were when we needed it. So
Yeah.
I just sort of coordinated that. But like I said, they're my buddies. I didn't know what else to do. What am
Yeah.
I supposed to do?
Do you still keep in touch with it? You retired when, 2019? Is that right?
19, yes.
Do you still
Yes.
keep in touch with is it the same team at Crook's Corner from when you left,
Well, it
or
closed.
oh, it's
No,
closed
they
now?
closed because of they haven't reopened. They're trying to reopen. There's a skeleton crew in there just to keep the building in order.
Hmm.
And we've been doing pop-ups this summer. We did honeysuckle sorbet, and we did that stupid Atlantic Beach pie thing that's about to drive me crazy. And we're getting ready to do
Let's
a
we got to
blackberry
talk about
sherbet
that.
because it's blackberry season. So, so they've been doing these pop-ups to keep themselves in the public mind. But the building was old, and it was a very complicated thing where they bought the building, and the management, the ownership of the business changed right when all the money went away, when everything closed. And so, it's turned into sort of a mess. And I'm happy to say that I wasn't there to have to unwind that. So that isn't very gracious. But I am trying to help them along without getting back in there. I'm not going to be in charge. I'm not going to be the chef. I'm too old. I'm 73, for God's sake. So my knees won't do it. So I'll help them out as best I can. And that means we've been doing these pop-ups all summer of favorite desserts. And so I'll keep doing that. And while I'm here, I go to Mexico a lot. I'm getting ready to go in a couple of weeks. I lead tours in Oaxaca now. It's my second career. So
Oh, nice.
yeah.
What tell me
So
about that? What is that derived from your affection with your team and kind of,
sort of.
or have you
Yeah.
always been a fan of Mexico? What's where?
No, I didn't know a soul from Mexico until I was probably 40.
Hmm.
No, it's sort of indirectly because of that. I happen to have a friend who owns a hotel in downtown Oaxaca, and she and I are about the same age, and she decided that wouldn't it be fun to do these tours, and it turned out it was. So we just started doing them. But I do have staff members from Oaxaca as well. So.
Yeah.
And
What are
she has this.
those? Sorry, what are those tours like? What is that?
We do a little bit of everything. She's lived there for 35 years, so she knows lots of people, lots of artisans and craftspeople and stuff. So we go visit them. There's a mezcal distiller that's 90 years old that she knows. We always go to see him. Where there's a lot of like sort of cool new edgy restaurants and a lot of sort of traditional old famous restaurants in the city. We go to those. We go to there's ruins. We go climb around in Monte Alban one morning. we leave some free time in. The city's beautiful. It's full of art museums and it's very old and pretty. And so we leave time for people to wander around on their own. And then, but we eat a lot, a whole lot, much more than I do ordinarily. And we travel out into the countryside to visit weavers and potters and candle makers and the mezcal guy and go to markets. They're fabulous markets, as you know, in Latin America. You
Yeah.
may know
Oh
or may
yeah.
not know, but yeah, they're shockingly fabulous. And so
Hmm.
we spend a lot of time in the markets, and each tour varies a little bit depending on the time of year and stuff. But and there's only about 10 people, and they're 10 days long, and we stay at Jane's Hotel, and it's really great. It's really fun.
Yeah,
So
it sounds awesome. Especially the part about the markets. I mean, one thing that that I loved about being out of the country is that most cultures other than ours are way more connected to their food system than we are. You know, as
uh,
Americans,
yeah,
you know, with the grocery store thing and like, the super Walmarts and stuff, like you could just find food, you know,
yeah,
in these giant strip malls where, in other cultures, like people actually make a trip. You know, you go to the market, you pick out your,
every day.
yeah, it's just an awesome way to go and to approach food for sure.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about, I want to get back a little bit to the early stuff.
Okay.
I'm this attraction to the arts and, how that kind of carried over to your cooking. And once you became a leader of your own team, I guess that was at Crook's Corner is kind of when you had your
Yeah.
first leadership gig. Did that
Right.
carry over into the mentality of your crew? Did you guys have music in the kitchen, that
Oh
kind of
yeah.
thing?
We did indeed. I like I said, I owned a rock club, and it was, but here it this is there's lots of indie rock things here. It's not top 40. It's not greatest hits music. We have a great radio station here too called WXYC, which is the student radio station, which is like you never know what you're going to hear. Probably you've never heard of it before. It might be like a chainsaw followed by Frank Sinatra. You don't even know. So anyway, that's the kind of I love that because. But when the when the guys in the kitchen came, I had a rule: when whoever was working got to pick the radio station. So of course we went to the Latino stations at night. Well, because by then my whole line were Mexican guys pretty much, and they would like sing and dance and cook, and I loved it.
Hmm. So,
Yeah.
what's your favorite music to cook to?
Oh
If
Lord.
you were working in the past and you got to control the music box,
Uh-huh.
what would be on there?
Well, like I said, we have such good radio. It would depend on the station and the DJ that day.
Gotcha.
We have a great jazz station here, and at home I listen to that a lot more than I would have imagined because I got so sick of the news. The news was driving me wild, and I would listen to NPR in the morning, and also one day I said, I can't take this anymore. This is about 2020, and I've had enough of this. So there's a jazz station over at Central, which is fabulous, and the DJs are great. And then I go back and forth to XYC, which is the student station that I was mentioning. I'm on the board of that actually because they needed citizens who weren't affiliated with the university. The law requires a certain number of people on the board that don't have anything to do with the station. So I listen to them a lot, and then I go to the Cradle still. It's still going. We sold it in '84, so I go to hear music. So I don't know. I like all kinds of stuff. It would be hard to pick.
Yeah.
Oh, and I love African music. So there's on Sunday afternoon. There's this African music show that's out of this world. So
Nice. Awesome. So you started cooking later, and I'm curious how your style and the cuisine at Crook's Corner kind of changed or evolved when you kind of got a chance to express your own cooking voice. When you weren't just like learning from somebody else or following, direction, and you actually
yeah.
got a chance to lead the team. What interested you at that time? What was kind of your focus, your ethos behind your cooking, and how did it kind of evolved at Crook's
Well,
Corner?
yeah, it was Southern. Crooks was a Southern restaurant, and I grew up in the South, in Eastern North Carolina. So I think slowly the food of Eastern North Carolina that I grew up with was sort of insinuated into that menu. But I didn't bother the skeleton of the menu. There was nothing wrong with it. There were lots of things that Bill had known from South Carolina. He was from upper South Carolina. So, but I began bringing in more and more of the things I knew just because they're what I knew, and I liked them, and I knew that they were good. And then having all these Mexican guys in the kitchen, we began. Next thing we knew, little bits and pieces of Mexican cooking kept sort of insinuating itself. Yeah, but not. I didn't turn into a Mexican restaurant, but we switched from hominy to pozole because it's better hominy. And then people developed taste for spicier and spicier food, so we did that. Things would become more highly seasoned sometime. And then we introduced things too that I'd learned from these guys when they would cook their own lunches and things. And so I thought, oh God, that stuff's great. So I figured out a way to make it Southern and put it on the menu. So it was an ongoing thing. I wasn't really even conscious of it. You wanted to keep things that people liked, but you also wanted to introduce new things to them as it made sense. So that was, say, well, it wasn't like I didn't set out as a plan with that, but it just was the way things worked.
Yeah.
Kitchens are like they're ongoing. You know that it's like there's no beginning and end. Once there's always a stock pot, and that's for down the road. And there's always, you try not to waste anything. If you're out to roast chicken, it turns into chicken salad, blah blah blah. So it's the same mentality, sort of. You just sort of go day by day, and you don't segment it very much. So that's the way I did the menu as well.
Yeah. Were you able to improve your business acumen as you started managing the kitchen? I know you said that you weren't much of a a business leader or manager when you guys had the Cat's Cradle, but as you started developing as a chef, were you able to kind of hone in? That's always been the worst part of the gig for me is
No,
the
that is
whole
that. Yeah, well, clearly I did because we didn't go broke.
yeah
But it took some learning. But I had to pay more attention. And by then, though, I'd learned how a little better too. Again, like you learn as you go, and that was one of the things you learned because you had. And I saw the numbers every day. I wrote the checks. I did the ordering. Yeah, I was better, and it wasn't. I wasn't the owner. I was merely an employee. So there was a boss looking over my shoulder that sort of kept things in line too. And he'd come in and say, "Listen, your numbers are horrible. You need to do something." And then I would know how to do something. I could figure out what to do. It wasn't, so.
yeah
But mostly we had good numbers. Mostly we had good numbers,
yeah.
honestly, most of the time.
Did you have people kind of helping you and teach you along the way, or were you kind of having to figure out a lot of this stuff on your own?
You mean the money?
Yeah, yeah, the business side of
Oh
things,
no,
like
no, I had no. I had to figure it out as I went.
yeah.
There was no accountant at my side, so.
Right, saying, "Hey, you gotta work on this, gotta work on that," kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, I would hear from the top, but it wasn't. There was no advice. It was just like figure it
Right.
out.
I gotcha. Yeah, yeah. James Beard. You got
Yeah,
nominated for a couple James Beard.
2 or 3 years in a row. Yeah,
Yeah, was that 2010? Is that right?
around there. Yeah,
Around
yeah.
2000. So you had been the chef at Crook's Corner since 91.
Uh,
Is that right?
93,
93.
93.
93.
Yeah,
So you've been chugging along, really pushing the southern food to the forefront. At that time, did you notice that southern food started to become more of a relevant cuisine?
yeah. Yeah, I sort of compare it to Southern authors. It's like it's a genre, and it comes in and out of fashion. But yeah, it did certainly.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting cuisine, and that was one good thing that Bill knew. Bill Neal realized. He said that it was a cuisine worth celebrating. It wasn't the cooking of the Beverly Hillbillies. It was like there was
Right.
good food that people. You know what I mean? So yeah, sure.
And what do you think is important about Southern? Because I agree with you. I actually had zero kind of experience or knowledge of Southern food before I moved to Charlotte in 2002. I trained in New York in French restaurants, and that was kind of my wheelhouse. It really opened my eyes when I moved to the South and started to be exposed to some of this Southern cooking. And I've definitely adopted a lot of it over the years, and my style has changed, and it's not Southern by any stretch, but there's definitely influence there. What about Southern food to you is important to preserve?
Whew, let's see. Well, anything that's good to eat is worth preserving. I don't think you need to necessarily label it Southern or not.
Hmm.
I like the seasonality of it. I think because we have still a lot of agriculture here, that's something that's certainly worth preserving. That's spread everywhere at this point, I think. I don't know, and I think that the history and traditions of the food is interesting.
Hmm.
But mainly, like I said earlier on, it's the main thing is to sit down to a good dinner, and
Right.
not and don't overanalyze it.
Hmm. Totally. I mean, I think that's kind of like the backbone of hospitality, right? Is sitting around a,
Sure,
a, a
sure it is.
table with
Yeah,
a good meal and kind of nourish
yeah,
yourself.
exactly. That's the whole reason to do it. I think.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree with you there. You've been at this for a long time. You retired a few years back. You mentioned that you're still doing some pop-ups and some other charity events and things like that. Do you plan to continue to do that kind of work?
Yeah, the pandemic sort of knocked all that out of the water for a year and a half, and I sort of got out of practice. And I came back in lately and found that I was in fact out of practice, and also it wore me out more than I was prepared for. So I'm going to have to be a little more. I shouldn't do things. What I did was I did something, a big dinner one night, and then the next day I did a lunch for 300 people. And I thought, you are too old to do this kind of thing anymore. I used to do crap like that all the time, and you look back and you say, how did you even do that? I mean, even when I was younger, you'd have to cook for 300 people in a field, with an extension cord and a card table or whatever, and you do it, and then you'd sort of pat yourself on the back, and then you think, what? Have you lost your mind? Don't say that you're going to do that anymore, but then you do. So
Right.
anyway, I think I finally learned not to just say yes all the time now.
Gotcha.
But yes, I would, of course. Why would I not? I try to be a good citizen, and I know that I can help folks out, and it's sort of flattering to be asked, but you need to learn what's reasonable, and you also have to learn not to show off. That's another thing I've learned in my old age, is that again, give them a good supper. Don't try to, you know, it's not a floor show. It's like it's dinner. So
Do you have an example of a time that maybe you tried to show off a little bit and it kind of backfired on you?
well, it did. I know we always did it, but just people would suggest they'd say, "Oh, we heard blah blah blah," and you'd think, "Oh, I can do that," and then you think, "Oh, great, good idea." That one time it was like confit duck for 10 million people in a field with a card table and like a hot box and what was it, like an element, like a plug-in hot plate,
Yeah, yeah.
to keep the sauce, and the sauce kept boiling over and soaking the tablecloth, and where it was dark.
Nobody
No
brought a
lights.
flashlight.
Well, there were like sort of lights, but they weren't. I don't know. It was. I always think of that. I'm not going to name names because it involved friends of mine, but um, that was like the craziest thing ever. And everybody said, "Oh, this is the best thing in the world. This food's so delicious. I don't know how you do it." And I was like, "I don't know how I do it either." But that was that. And so there, that's. Hopefully, I won't fall for that again. So.
That's funny. What about the kitchen life kind of spoke to you? Like what was it
Um,
what was it about like being in the kitchen and attracted you to this kind of work?
well, I think I might have run my kitchen differently than other people because I didn't ever make anybody behave, and I didn't make them call me chef or anything like that, and they were not above putting ice down the back of my underpants and stuff. And I sort of liked that,
Yeah.
and I did it as a I don't know. I saw it as a team rather than me, the boss of all these guys.
Mhm.
And like I said, I didn't make anybody behave themselves. As long as the food went on like it was supposed to, if they wanted to wrestle between runs, I don't care, But a lot of people, that would drive a lot of people crazy, I know, in this business. But that was just the way I did it because it made them unemployable when I was gone. But
Yeah.
whatever,
Yeah.
it worked for us. I saw it as it was I don't know, it was almost like we were playing in a way. But we had to do our work like we were supposed to.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? I say, but I don't know any other chefs honestly that would have put up with what I did and enjoyed it as well.
Did you ever instigate this kind of behavior? Was that part of your
Probably,
Yeah,
yeah, probably. I'm sure I did.
that's awesome.
I would put Tabasco in someone's coffee when they weren't looking. Yes, so
Guilty. Guilty as charged.
yeah.
I'm curious if there's any particular meals or guests that you've cooked for over the years that really stick out as like a high point, like something that you like remember and kind of like have a memory or cherish, like a particular service or cooking at a place or an event that really stuck out for you as being a winner.
Yeah, actually, I think maybe our finest hour was when uh, we went down to Oxford, Mississippi to cook the opening night party for one of the symposiums at the Southern Foodways Alliance. And I took my guys with me, and my sisters came too. And they wanted, what do they call it? Nueva, North Carolina. They wanted examples of how Mexican food had insinuated itself into the cooking of North Carolina. So we did all kinds of things. It was for like 500 people, and we had a couple of days to do it. And my guys were great, and we had a big time. And I think that was that showed us at our finest, frankly. I mean, you know, we did lots of things at the restaurant too, but for some reason that to me always stands out. I always think back fondly of that. I'm so proud of everybody because it was, it was hard to go that far away from your kitchen You don't know where anything is. You don't know all this stuff. But they did great. It was fantastic, and it was well received.
How did you
And
guys?
the opening night party of that thing is always really fun because everybody's been away for, we haven't seen each other for a year, and it's like this fabulous cocktail party, and so everybody's really in a mood, mood for good food and conversation and stuff. So it was quite flattering to even have been asked to do that. So that was our biggie, I think, of all my years there.
That's awesome. What did you guys cook for that event?
Oh God, all kinds of stuff. We had tamales, and we did sort of a pork shank pozole, and we did a mango salad with hot pepper, with a cayenne pepper and mint, and we did gosh, what else? It was about 5 courses. The dessert though was we did this sorbet that is based on popsicles in Mexico, which are full of candy. So we did orange sorbet with red hot stirred into it, and that really stopped the show. People love
Oh,
that.
that's interesting.
No, it was fabulous. It's so good, you can't believe it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Looking at kind of the cuisine of the South, or even just like cooking generally, do you have any thoughts about where you'd like to see things go? A direction that you kind of see things going? Is there anything that kind of sticks out to you? Is there any concerns that you see, or kind of like your current affairs overview of kind of like where you see the restaurant world right now? Do you have any
Well,
views on that?
the pandemic was a real punch in the gut. I
Hmm.
mean, a lot of my friends did not reopen. Like I said, Crooks hasn't reopened yet. They're still trying to. And everybody has had to sit down and rethink everything. They had to think about how to look after themselves better, how to look after their staffs better, reconsider everything, what's reasonable. For what, you probably know this too, is that you were supposed to kill yourself every night, at
Hmm.
work. I mean, it was just understood that it would be awful and hard, and you would never get enough rest and everything. I think that's all gone. That's all gone.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of friends who've been able to reopen who look at me sort of with envy and say, got out just in time. And it's because they realize that they've just been exhausted, and they've altered their hours, and they've, uh, reconsider the way they run their kitchens and all kinds of stuff like that. So that's the main thing to think about now, not so much the menus. People at this point, at least around here, are open to pretty much anything on a menu. They sort of trust their chef friends to come up with good food, and so food trends I don't see. I mean, new things come and go, but people here, everybody likes everything now. So it's just a matter of what you can think of and when you do it.
Right.
But the main thing that's happened in recent years is just that pandemic that just about finished people off. I mean, that was,
Yeah.
and and their staff, nobody had any money, and oh man, it was, and well, as well as I do what it was like. So
Yeah.
um, a lot of people were hanging by a thread, and like I said, a lot of people haven't opened. We have places here in town that did not reopen, that people were very fond of. So
Do you think that in order for restaurateurs or chefs or restaurants to be successful moving forward, they're going to have to address this the worker environment, worker kind of situation, the
yes, I do,
quality?
yeah. I don't know if you know Chapel Hill, but Dip's Country Kitchen is really famous. Miss Dip, she's passed away now, but it was the soul food kitchen, they used to call it. And they have to close several days a week because they can't get enough employees.
Mm,
And it's because they can't afford to pay any more than what they pay, and so they have to be open less hours. I don't know how Spring's got. Spring is a good friend of mine. She's the daughter of the founder of that restaurant,
mhm.
and they're still trying to figure out what to do. Because the well, it's just the balance sheet. Things cost this much money, and then that's all the money you have, and so
Right.
so yeah, and but that kind of thing is important. I know 3 or 4 restaurants, Lantern, and Acme, and Glass Half Full here in town. Have on the first thing when you open the menu is that we've raised prices to do a livable wage, and and in Chapel Hill, I think it's $18 an hour is considered a livable wage, and then some of them have just added to the prices, and other people have said it will be added to your check. So you see that first thing. So the public has gone along with that. It looks like to me.
Hmm.
People understand that. Now, this is a wealthy community, and whether that would be, we work someplace else, in a working class town or something, I'm not sure. But this is these people here can afford to do it, and probably agree with the concept at least, even if they don't like the price.
Right.
Um, but it is being instituted here, and it's been over a year now since those places have done it. It looks like it's going to stick. I think so.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Good. I would have given all my staff all the money I had. If it
Hmm.
was up to me, I, you know,
Sure.
they did a lot more than they made, as far as I was concerned, always.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to realize too is like, I think chefs learn this pretty early on in their leadership. Usually, is that you're only as good as your team. I mean, it's
Absolutely,
like the chefs that are running these kitchens. They might be the creative force or they might be the organizational drive behind the kitchen crew, but it's the guys on the line grinding it out
absolutely.
that are feeding the guests. So,
Yeah,
you,
yeah, and you got to get in there with them too. I was not above washing dishes. If
yeah,
the dishwasher didn't show up, just you can't be the leader if you can't do that. I used to, like I say, I used to in a bar said I was used to cleaning up nasty bathrooms, and so I, before I made anybody else do it, sometimes I just okay, just put on rubber gloves and go do it and shut up.
yeah,
So because I felt like I shouldn't. You know what I mean.
totally.
Yeah.
Are you seeing people kind of return to normal in Chapel Hill as far as like their dining habits and stuff like that? Are people getting out? Are people anxious to get out and go to the restaurants and support the community there, or is it kind of a slow going getting back to normal?
It's sort of some of each. Most places are like I was in 411 West last night, and Tommy, the owner or one of the owners, was there, and he was saying, "Oh, we were really busy tonight. He was glad. He wasn't complaining, but they didn't. Again, they were short staffed, and so some of the bartenders were having to wait on tables and stuff. But yeah, I think by and large, people are. There's still people who are skittish, but yeah, no, I think people want to. Now they're saying there's another one coming. There's some new variant that we don't know how it's going to play out. So
Right.
I think it depends on your age and your health as much as anything. But by and large, people are out again. It looks like to me.
Yeah. Did you ever experience being in Chapel Hill? It's a large university kind of community. They're a lot big college town. Does that affect the restaurant business there, like the ebb and flow of maybe servers and employees? Did you have a lot of turnover? Was that something that was just kind of normal, or did you find that you had kind of a stable crew that was always there?
Yeah, well, that's actually why I ended up with so many Mexican guys in the kitchen because the students would come and go, and the Mexicans wouldn't. They would learn their job. They would learn what you wanted them to do. Oh, usually they started as dishwashers, and then they would be watching, and somebody would quit, and they'd raise their hand and say, "Well, listen, I've been watching. I bet I can do that." So, and they didn't go anywhere. So the guys that worked for me, I had guys that worked for me for 20 years. I had 4 or 5 guys, my core, the guys I took to Mississippi with me, or the guys I took to cook at the Beard Foundation. Those guys have been with me forever, and I had peripheral students. So I didn't mind students. It's just that they wanted, long holidays and they wanted weekends off, and and they had
Hmm.
to go to the beach, and which is fine. I understand that. Who doesn't? So that was cool. But I had this core of guys that were the same. The wait staff at Crooks was the same way. There were 4 or 5 people that were sort of full time, and they'd been there for a long time, and they had other things going on. Like they might be artists, or they might be whatever, writers, or blah blah blah. And they needed an income, and this was a good income, for a certain amount of hours a week, and then that would give them time to do whatever else they did. So we had a core of those, and then that was sort of filled in. They filled in around the edges with people from students and stuff. And
Gotcha.
also, I had occasionally in my kitchen rock and roll guys, people in bands, because they need a flexible schedule, and so they like work hard and play hard, and they're smart usually, and so that was sort of a cool addition, and they would come and go as well.
That's kind of an interesting parallel. The rock and roller musicians and and the kitchen crew. I see some parallels to that kind of. Did that have anything to do with your affection for the kitchen?
Oh well, yeah, sure. And I knew the guys because I know the bands.
Right.
I knew both worlds, and so it would be logical. They would say, "Oh, I need a couple hours somewhere. Can I come do whatever?" And often the answer would be yes. And if it was, and then I'd take them on. So,
Did you guys?
and you can almost make a living in bands around here too. That's another thing. It's like you can't quite support yourself, but you can come close maybe
Right.
if if you're a successful musician. So but you need a flexible schedule as you go on tour and stuff.
Right.
So
Did you find that the kitchen community when you were coming up to be kind of a tight knit community? Did you guys like all hang out? The chefs from different restaurants. You guys go out to the bars and bullshit after service and that kind of thing, or was it a little more competitive kind of market when you were?
No, no, no. We were all really good friends and still are actually, and not just here in Chapel Hill, but all over.
Yeah.
Like I have friends in Durham and Raleigh too. We know we're all like sort of beloved colleagues. I don't, as long as the economy is doing pretty well, we're not really competitors. I don't think because people know this is a good area to come and have good food. And so one night you'll go one place, one night you'll go to another. But no, no, no. We're all very fond of each other. I think.
Yeah, I really appreciate that about cooking in the South. It's one of the reasons that I stayed in the South when I moved down here. I remember cooking in New York is, it's a pretty competitive, cutthroat market up there. The crews were like bands of pirates, always trying to outdo each other and stuff. But then moving down here, like, just the camaraderie amongst chefs and restaurant people.
No, no, it's really true.
Yeah,
It's very appealing.
that's awesome. So what's next for you, Bill? What are you working on? Tours going down in Mexico. You got anything else kind of cooking on the back burner or something you're interested in doing?
Well, I'm always writing. I've got you can't see what my office, but I'm in my office, but I have like probably 9 cookbooks piled up on my desk right this minute. If I just had the gumption to get them together, I need to hire myself a new editor, I guess. But so there may be another cookbook. I was thinking about perhaps a memoir about my staff, actually, since we've been talking about them so much, it makes sense to mention that. But I like to travel. I'm keep doing these tours of Mexico. This will be our third one this year. I think 3 is probably all we'll manage this year, but we're going to do a bunch next year too. And we do those every 3 or 4 months, and that's honestly, um, that's so lovely. It almost makes you lazy. It sounds like work, but it's just you just sit there and drink these fabulous mezcal margaritas, and in this pretty place. And so I'll be doing more of that and some more writing. I do a lot of magazine writing too. I've had things in our state magazine, Garden and Gun. I've got a bunch of stuff in Southern Living. So I do a lot of that too. I enjoy writing. I should do more of that. I just don't have very much discipline, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I understand that. What do you like to write? What really interests you as far as when you sit down to put pen to paper? What interests you?
Well, the things I write for magazines, they've come to me. They said, "Well, would you this you know about this? Would you do this?" And so it's food things, 100%. Like I said, the other thing I'm thinking about maybe a memoir that seems sort of vain at times. I feel the need to talk about my staff some more. So I think that's probably what I'll do next. I've never imagined writing fiction or novels or anything very much, and I wish I were a poet, but I'm not. So
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Bill, that's all I got for you today. Unless there's anything else you wanna talk about, I find it fascinating, kind of all the stuff that you've done, and the influence that you've kind of had on Southern cuisine and making it popular and strengthening the whole team dynamic and focusing on your crew has been an awesome inspiration and something that I really appreciate. So
well,
I
thank you. I've always considered myself very lucky. I mean, I've always thought I was one of the luckiest people in the world because everything's sort of fallen my way, and I sort of blunder forward without a plan, but I seem to manage. So I've always considered myself very fortunate. So I'm lucky to be where I am right now.
well, it's working out for you, man. So best of luck with that. And yeah, if there's anything else, man, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh no, thank you for inviting me. It's been nice talking to you.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, adios. Bye bye.
Bye.